Hi, and welcome back to Decolonizing Research through Podcast as Storytelling. I'm your host, Jessica Hum, and I'm back today with a podcast interview with our guest, Dr. Elder Albert Marshall from Unama'ki, also known as Cape Breton in Nova Scotia. As a brief intro, Elder Albert is the highly regarded spokesperson for the Mi'kmaw Elders of Unama'ki on environmental issues. He brought forward the concept of eh-tuap-ta-mumk, or two-eyed seeing, as a guiding principle for the Integrative Science Program at Cape Breton University, where he received an Honorary Doctorate in 2009. In our conversation, Albert speaks about two-eyed seeing, along with the Mi'kmaw principles of Netukulimk, or sustainability, and mitsit-nogamak, or all my relations. Albert is very passionate about his work in advocating for the integration of Eurocentric education systems with Indigenous and particularly Mi'kmaw ways of knowing. I first met Albert as part of the Dalhousie College of Sustainability lecture series, his third such lecture, back in February of this year. I was a student assisting the organizing of a workshop called Transformative Politics of the Wild with Dr. Andrea Olive from U of T and Dr. Karen Baisley from Dalhousie's School for Resource and Environmental Studies. Albert and I kept in touch, and for this podcast interview, we spoke by phone early in the month of April. And so here is our conversation.
Good morning again.
Good morning, Albert.
Yes, how are you?
I'm doing great, yeah. And yourself, too?
Wonderful.
I'm wondering if you could describe a bit more some early practices of Netukulimk and ways that you find balance in your environment.
Yeah, we see, in our understanding, Netukulimk, of course, is much richer than how one goes about sustaining themselves. It's really an objective in which it constantly reminds you, yes, you do have a privilege to be able to sustain yourself utilizing the gifts of the Creator. But overall, you also are constantly reminded that as you are going about in sustaining yourself, you have no right to compromise the ecological integrity of the area, nor, in this era, compromise the cleansing capacity of the system. As well, you also are reminded that your responsibility in your short period of time here, that your actions will always be done in a way in which it would also create an opportunity for the future generations as to how they might be able to sustain themselves, as well to continue to live with nature by studying it, by learning it, and by observing it, because unless one is somewhat intimately connected to your environment, then it's very, very difficult for one then to look at it from an Aboriginal perspective, which is natural world is alive. It is physical and it's spiritual. And everything that we do onto it ultimately will affect us or impact us, because again, it is something that is alive. It's something that part of that word Netukulimk reminds you on an ongoing basis that we are so interconnected, interdependent with that, and that we are not the superior being here, but rather very small part and parcel of it. believe we have to remind ourselves that with the rest of all the creatures, we're the only ones that have a cognitive mind. And with that cognitive mind, we have the ability at times to transform our natural world to our advantages, to our own use, to our own greed. Now, as an Aboriginal person, we have to remind ourselves on a daily basis, whether you call it a reaffirmation, of what your inherent responsibilities are. Because I think it's very, very easy in this day of age, with all the automations, with all the luxuries, etc., and other stuff, for us to be able to forget why we are here and what our responsibilities are here. So for us, it's a little more, not simpler, but easier, because that's part of something that is very much inherent in our culture, that have to remind ourselves on a daily basis of how susceptible, how vulnerable we are, and what our responsibilities are. So Netukulimk is not just how one goes about sustaining themselves, but rather something in which how you will conduct yourself, how you will take care, how you will become then the eye, the ear, and the voice for the ones that they cannot defend themselves in the human form.
Yeah.
That's a short version.
That's fantastic, Albert. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that, Albert? Like ways of reaffirming your connection and your balance to Netukulimk?
Well, you see, since this Mother Earth, or natural world, is alive, therefore, we use the word, as you probably might have heard it, we use the word Amsidnogama.
Mm-hmm.
All my relations.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about when you're under the, not influence, but when you're under the mindset of Netukulimk, you are actually not just referring to your kin, your family, your extended family, but actually your overall family, which is your natural world, and every living thing. And every living thing, you have some sense of responsibility for that, because as this word implies, that interconnectivity, interdependency, that each and every one of those creatures, they do have a purpose. Whether that purpose is to maintain and to enhance the biodiversity, which in most cases is the case, as well as that it also provides nourishment for others and all that stuff, because it's a continuous cycle in which these creatures would come and go, and they would fulfill their purpose, and so on. So Netukulimk then, it's really a lesson that cannot be taught in just one setting,
Mm-hmm.
but rather something in which you have to carry it and enhance it through your entire life, because your responsibility does not end just because you have showed reverence to some other living entity, but rather of ensuring that every action that one takes cannot be transformed to be a negative, in which it might compromise someone else's abilities, not just to be able to sustain themselves, but also to be able to fulfill what their purpose is in this life. So now I believe, I think it should be very much encouraging if somehow that concept could be brought into our daily activities in conjunction with that concept of twice seeing.
Oh, yes.
Because you see, with those two metaphors, or whatever you want to call them, I think it's really a guiding principle, or could be used as guiding principles as to how we go about during our short stay here, of being able to be sustained, but at the same time, to make sure that as I am going about sustaining myself, I have no right whatsoever to compromise the ecological integrity of the area. And now we have to concern ourselves with the cleansing capacity of our area. Mm-hmm. And that my responsibility is to look 7 generations ahead. For that 7 generations, for that length of time, for them as well to be able to sustain themselves. And at the same time, be able to learn and to hear what the natural world is telling them. And they, in turn, their responsibilities are no greater or less. Their responsibility has to be carried on of ensuring that their next 7 generations will also have the same opportunities as we have. And make an effort that their opportunities could and hopefully would be greater than what I have now. So that's the overall objective, and it's a cycle from generation to generation. And I believe this is why I believe I believe wholeheartedly that it seems then that whenever our natural world, whenever our Mother Earth is in trouble, we would be the first in the front line of speaking up, and to, not only to remind ourselves but to remind others of ensuring that we maintain the integrity of her, because it's very easy to realize that if she is not healthy, how can we humans be healthy? Because we solely depend upon her for everything. Even though now we have become distracted recently with the advancement of science and technology, in which most of us are pretty well comfortable in believing that science has somehow managed to transform our world into human creation. But obviously, that's not possible. Look at the situation we are currently in.
Yeah.
Where is science now? How can science? Why? If this science is so great, how come science cannot deal with this? Deal with this crisis that we're having now. So I believe this is something in which that the Aboriginal peoples of the world have tried for a long period of time of trying to get that messages across. But somehow, and each time we were silenced because we are so few in numbers. And just changing subject a little bit, I believe to me or to us here that in light of what's happening now with this virus, to us it's not new. To us it is meant for us to self-reflect and see and really and seriously look how we got here, and look at what the health repercussions are to our natural world. Let's reflect and admit to our inactions, to our silences, and to our denials, we have allowed others to compromise the ecological integrity of the area. We have allowed others to compromise the cleansing capacity of the system. So now, she cannot regenerate herself fast enough because of the rate of extraction. She cannot cleanse herself because of the rate of toxins being pumped into the air and into the water. So what does that, where would that leave us? I guess, so if and when, if we can somehow humble ourselves and put our fingers in a victory form and see ourselves as we actually are now on a crossroads. One road, we have a prerogative. Is it going to be business as usual? And if it's business as usual, well, yeah, we know what the outcome of that one would be.
Oh yeah.
But I believe if it's going to be a total reflection and really look at some of the mistakes, some of the things that have been done in the past, and transform those as lessons learned, and to abide by those lessons, I believe that we will stand a chance, because I don't believe that in my culture there is no such word as end of the world. The world will not end. Only people will be gone. I know that's going away of the subject.
We'll just maybe jump right there. Is about when Mother Earth is unwell. And you talk about this situation we're in today, this virus, how it presents an opportunity to change our ways, to really transform how we have been harming the ecological and cleansing integrity of the environment. So, I'm really wondering if you could share a bit more along that line, because we have this opportunity to change our behavior and adapt. Really it's about adaptation so that we can help the land heal and help ourselves heal. Okay. From that perspective, I think it made it more difficult. Without looking at how did we get here, and what were the instruments of guiding us into this state of destruction. And I would have to seriously look at it. Not total blame on it, but I would seriously look at it as an instrument, which would be then research. Yes. Now, I don't know if how many times you might have heard about from us saying, we have been researched to death. Mm-hmm. But now we want to research ourselves back to life. Because research is a wonderful tool. If we can somehow get some kind of a dialogue going with the researcher beforehand, and see if they would be possibly interested of looking at it from an insight perspective, then all
we mean by insight? You know, there's got to be feelings, emotions, and of course thoughts as to how you can get to know someone or something much more than what you really see or what's been, you know what I mean? So, in other words, again, there's another word that we employ, and we sometimes remind people that to us, what really constitutes a real relationship, and that is the exchange of stories. Because from this exchange of stories, we will know who we are, where we come from, and why we are here. And after the dialogue concludes, we will clearly know where are we going. Now, to date, that where are we going has not been discussed to any length because the Eurocentric system and the Aboriginal knowledges have not been implicated to any degree so far. So we can't even talk about where are we going because we haven't even settled on the first tree yet, who we are, where we come from, and why we are here. So unless there is some concerted effort made, which is really going to be part and parcel of our survival here. You know, I mean, I'm sure you have heard so many times about certain prophecies from certain cultures, and one of our main prophecies, of course, which is pretty much universal, and that is when all peoples come together, the black, the red, the white, and the yellow, and they start talking as to how, not only how they can coexist, that's the easy part, but to begin to enter into these dialogues. So each race will be able to bring forth the gifts that they have been given, and in which those gifts could be very, very beneficial and effective, maybe to my ear, even though they might be from on the other side of the world. So inclusion then, I think, has to be something in which part of that reflection has to be now, because see, up to date, even humans don't have rights. Corporations have bigger rights. Now these things have to change, and if they don't, well, you know, might as well just submit and get ready for the day, for the doomsday, so to speak. But anyway, I think it's a wonderful opportunity. Now again, I talk about research. Research has to do a lot of transformation as well, because, as I said, is it accidental that we have been very reluctant when researchers come to our communities, because we see very clearly what their main objective is, and that's just to try to extract fact. So therefore, now, you know, I mean, and without them even realizing that the flow of knowledge is much different from each culture. For example, ours. Our culture was never written. It was always transmitted orally. Now, if that person is prepared to invoke not their suspicion but their true I seeing, is that, you know, maybe I'm quite comfortable in the methodology has how subjects could be substantiated, could be authenticated. But here is something in which it has not been written. So how do I truly know that the subject matter I'm receiving is authentic, accurate, and sacred? Then that will break down the relationship. But for us, it's very simple, because whenever there is an investigation of any kind, especially here in Unama'ki, when the researcher comes into our area, they will talk to this one individual, and this one individual, of course, will ask, what's the subject matter here? Second point would be that we recommend that you have to take in 2 from each community, so 10 people minimum. And the purpose for that minimum, of course, is to ensure that the information that you will be receiving will be authentic, accurate, and sacred to the best of that group's ability. So it's not a question of ethics or unethics. It's a question of this information would be accurate and authentic to the best of this present generation. Because if we begin to alter it or change it, it will no longer be considered traditional knowledge.
Yeah. Albert, I remember you talking about this when we had our very first conversation earlier this year. It was just after the new year, I recall. And because we were talking about research from, Dalhousie, from my perspective of a student here, I distinctly remember your saying to really have valuable exchange of stories to bring together 2 people from each community, the 10 people minimum. And now that you've had a chance to explain this even more, the authentic, accurate, and sacred stories, that exchange is so important, isn't it? Like the exchange between people in the communities, as well as between research and people being part of the research.
Our thinking is very much circular. Simply put, you think from your heart, mind, spirit, and body. You know what I mean? So unless those indicators are evident, then I think it'd be justifiable for anyone to remind the researcher that, I'm sorry, but we have been researched to death. And this is only way we can research ourselves back to life. If all those indicators were part and parcel of our exchange. Because, you see, again, the research will generate policies, right?
Yeah.
And policies will generate programs. And once that program gets into that point, what are the possibilities of altering it or changing it? I think it's going to be very difficult. So to ensure that when you get to that point, it's going to be a mutual understanding, mutual exchanges. Otherwise, it might not meet those criteria.
I think that's a really good segue or an opportunity, Albert, for me to elaborate or just share what the intention of this recording this interview and this research is to also share back by using the internet, in this way that we can't connect in person as much as before, or hopefully in the future we will be back to that. But sharing these stories and this exchange of stories on the internet is another way that I hope the university is giving back to your community and the communities of other Aboriginal groups that we are able to share the stories with.
Yes, and I hope, and I do hope that that universities will also be engaging themselves in some kind of a transformative changes,
Mm-hmm.
in which they would seriously look at their total system and make some concerted effort as to how they can now at least make some attempts of integrating other ways of knowing, especially in Aboriginal ways of knowing, especially in this geographic area, Mi'kmaw ways of knowing, and make a very profound effort of integrating those two different ways of knowing. Because demographically, we have to admit, we are the fastest growing population. And whether people think superiorly or inferiorly, we have to bear in mind, if you're a young individual, if you're a non-Caucasian person, and you are somewhat full of these prejudices or whatever, you better remember that who's going to mind you when you're in your care, when you get old? Who's going to be looking after you? Who's going to look after you? But that's humor. That's not a fact. But what I'm saying is that unless there is going to be some concerted effort made as to why is there such a drive of trying to suppress, trying to ignore the Aboriginal ways of knowing into the institutions. Now, without seeking a direct answer, I think we can begin to work together and bring forth those perspectives in which they would be heavily weighed down with both knowledges, not just with one. That's my dream anyway. That's my hope anyway. That because what it really says to me is that when this being done at this manner here, I know that at least from the scientific perspective, we can practically prove that we have been here 15,000 years or more. Now, by our knowledge is being suppressed and ignored, what are they really saying? They're really saying that the knowledge that was gathered through those many years has no relevance today. That's a statement that the universities are making. Now, once you deliver that message, how can anyone then expect those Aboriginal students to excel? Because they have been damaged. They have been ignored, suppressed, and so on. So I hope anyway, that this will give us an opportunity now and to really reflect of not only how we got here, but what was missing and what needs to be included as we want to be moving into the future. That's my only hope. And I believe research can do that. Highlight those points. what I would call ethical space.
Mm. Yeah, that's very hopeful. I share that hope so much. I feel so privileged that when you came to visit at Dalhousie in February, and I'm sure in previous times that you've come to speak to the students, you've inspired people to come and listen to your words and really think about how that transformation takes place.
I'm just a conduit to that knowledge. It is not mine. I'm just a conduit to it. So I have no right whatsoever to take claim over it. I'm just a conduit to it.
You really speak up about it. You had mentioned silence. It's so important to challenge that silence and to make sure that you're using your voice about this. I think that's, if I could say, that's been one of your life's work, to continue using your voice to speak up for this.
Well, unfortunately or fortunately, that's all I have. Because I have to admit, even without shame, that I cannot write in English. One reason is that I cannot spell. Mm-hmm. Secondly, I feel I don't have an adequate control or understanding of the English grammar for me to try to but I try to at least try to do it with my voice.
Yeah.
I can't do it with my hands, with my pen. But that's one of the handicaps I have, is that I cannot transform my thoughts into a written text and expect any audience to be able to understand them.
Well, that's a big reason why sharing these stories orally is so important, because it's a way your words, even as a conduit, can reach large amounts of people, hopefully through the internet, through, like, we're conversing on the telephone here. That's my hope with this work, and Sherry Pictou herself has really inspired me to use mediums like the telephone, podcast. It's almost like radio in a sense, as ways of sharing and amplifying people's stories. So she's teaching me how to do this in a way within the institution, within the university, to say, well, if you do these recordings just like radio, this counts towards part of your education. And now the university is having to do that for everybody. Online classes, online videos.
I hope soon as well that the universities will at least start applying some helping hand of complete this reconnection. And the greater part, of course, that's missing is that the language.
Yeah.
Even though in a lot of degrees now we are using English to teach Mi'kmaw. And if that continues much further, our language should be gone, even though it'll be spoken, because the spirit will not be there. So I believe universities, the institutions could make a very, very profound way of helping us, and that is to not only include but integrate our way of knowing into the institution through the language. Because right now, as I see it, there's only a very small percentage of us that can actually speak, and much more comfortable speaking in Mi'kmaw than I am in English. And if that's gone, yes, we will speak in Mi'kmaw, but using English. Now these taken very, very seriously, because it's not a question of who's an Indian and who isn't. What the point here is that, we're going to be talking about Mi'kmaw concepts. They have to come from the language itself, not from another concept. And I think that's something that needs to be stressed over and over again. While there is an opportunity now, because that opportunity is disappearing on a daily basis, and nothing has been done to date to capture the spirit of that language, meaning that there is nothing in place in which, when these young people want to reconnect, they would have a point of reference. There is no point of reference in which young people can do research about their language, about their culture, about their ceremonies, because there isn't any. Now, with the help of all of us, institutions and everyone else, I believe we can achieve that. But this is something that's going to be too much burdensome on one. But if it's done collectively, I think it can be done. And it's very difficult for me to understand. Here, ideally, in Nova Scotia, I don't know how many universities we have, including a greater part of New Brunswick. I don't know how many universities we are talking about here. But I would also have to say that none of them actually had made any concerted effort of actually trying to integrate of who we are into the institution. And the question that comes down to us is why? Why is there such a reluctance? Why is there such a fear? Is it a fear that if they were to integrate more Aboriginal ways of knowing into the Eurocentric system, it will compromise the essence or the spirit of that system? What is it? Now, how can we truly and honestly ask these questions without anyone going on the defensive?
I hear you that it brings up people's defenses because it challenges, like you say, at the core of it, these institutions began by colonizing institutions, and to really decolonize research and the whole institution of universities will require some critical looking at transformative change.
As well as cognitive transformation.
Yeah.
That have to go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Without the cognitive transformation, the other part just falls under deaf ear.
Very good points, Albert. Yes. This is really at the core of this interview, and at the core of this work here is working towards decolonizing people, myself, others who listen to this, and hopefully, through conversations with you and other people that I interview, we're able to amplify those voices and put them out there. So that's the end of my questions for you, Albert, which I feel that you've answered them so honestly. So
I do apologize for taking you all over the hemisphere.
It's been a great trip.
but this exchange of story, and it's really very, very it is very, very effective. Because when you apply facts into research, you actually are putting blinders on. But if you were to include or integrate insights, especially to the Aboriginal people, because the information will always be presented in the form of a story, rather than I telling you this is a fact.
Yeah.
I am giving you a prerogative to extract what you will need from these stories that I've been telling you. In other words, I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt that you can, because I have given you more than what you would have required or asked when you were constructing your factual questions. Because now the flow of information is going to be based on insight, heart and mind and soul.
Well, Alan, yes.
Well, yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Albert.
Call anytime. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I wish that you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Bye.
Okay. Thanks. Bye-bye. Wow. What a fantastic, hopeful, and inquisitive conversation. I had a lot of fun, and I enjoyed hearing directly from Elder Albert Marshall on his encouragement about this method of story exchange and how it can really provide insights into research. Elder Albert Marshall, as many people who are familiar with his work, know that he lectures internationally, both within the academic institutions as well as in communities, particularly his Mi'kmaw Indigenous communities. And in our conversation, he asked quite a few rhetorical questions, like, is the university, quote unquote, that being all academic communities, fearful, resistant, and suppressing Indigenous ways of knowing? And he also called to attention our current situation with the virus and the opportunities that we have right now to be reflecting and contemplating a transformative future. He said that we are really at a crossroads right now. So with that, I'm just going to close with a little hint of the next episode of the podcast. This work is really as part of my research in decolonizing myself, as well as decolonizing research, that's been really encouraged by two wonderful teachers within the Dalhousie and academic institution communities. That's Dr. Melanie Zerba and Dr. Sherry Pictou. And both of them have been instrumental in my getting to know Elder Albert Marshall. So they're both really familiar with his work, and I hope have really enjoyed listening to this podcast too. So I can't wait to bring you another conversation on our next episode. That's all I'll say for now, but it will be a very interesting and somewhat different conversation than the ones we've been having over the last 3 episodes. So something new, something experimental, something decolonizing coming up next. Thanks so much for your time, for listening to these stories, for being a part of the process. And take care. Have a wonderful day.